Chairman is to introduce our intern, Vidar. So when you get to that point, you can ask him to introduce himself to you.
Great. Yeah. My name is Vidar Mari, and I'm a student at the University of Utah. I'm doing urban planning, and yeah, I'm with you here, guys.
Vidar, welcome. Well, let's have you do that after the meeting starts so we get it on the minute.
Okay.
Okay, you're good to go, Brandon.
Okay. Okay, we welcome you all out. Anyone who may be watching or participating in our Zoom meeting tonight to the North Ogden Planning Commission meeting, January 20th, held virtually on Zoom and being broadcast on YouTube, I believe. I'm Vice Chairman Mason, and I'll be conducting the meeting tonight because our chairman has an item on our agenda, and we are going to, I'm going to take over for that reason. So, okay, we're going to start tonight with an invocation or thought by Commissioner Waite, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Barker. And I turn the time over to Commissioner Waite for that, followed by Commissioner Barker.
Okay, thank you. Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for this opportunity we have to meet as Planning Commission and those members of our community who are involved and interested in these dealings of the government. We thank Thee for living in a land where we can participate in how we are governed. We're thankful for this beautiful city that we live in. We ask Thee to bless us this night as we talk, as we deliberate, and as we review the action items before us. Bless us that we will be mindful of the effect that things will have on the citizens of this community, that we will work in what will be the best interests of the majority of the community, and we say to bless us that our discussions will be civil and that we will work to the best and common good. We thank Thee for all these things Thou hast given to us, and we say this in Jesus' name, amen.
Yeah. If you want to stand, say the Pledge of Allegiance where you're at. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thanks to you both for doing that. By way of a little bit of business, we briefly heard from our new intern, Vidar, before the meeting started. I'd like for him to take just a second and introduce himself, and so that it's recorded on the minutes. So Vidar, can you let us know a little about you?
Hello, everybody. My name is Vidar Mari, and I'm a student at the University of Utah, and I'm an urban planner student. And yeah, that's all about me. And now I join your team, guys, and I'm looking forward to learn more from you guys.
Great, looking forward to working with you, Vidar.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for, you're about to have 90 minutes of fascinating discussion by the best planning commission in the state.
That's
If I don't
nice.
say so myself. Okay, and all of that was a lie. So let's see. We have come to the point where we note that all commissioners are present, if I'm not mistaken, correct? For our roll call, they are all present, and I make note of that. Did anyone have a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting? We were looking for approval of those. I've entertained a motion to approve, if so.
Yes, I will make a motion to approve the minutes from our January 6th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Let's do by voice vote and raise of hand. All in favor of approving those minutes, say aye.
Aye.
If any are opposed by the same motion. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to take a brief second and read our opening minutes statement, modified for a Zoom meeting. This purpose of this should give you an idea of what we are doing and some of our procedures. So before each Before each agenda item begins, city staff will give a report. After the staff report, the item will be opened up for other speakers. The applicant will speak first and be allowed up to 10 minutes. Following the applicant, any interested person will be allowed to speak up to 3 minutes. The applicant has final rebuttal time up to 5 minutes. Any materials that are displayed or referenced, examples of pictures or written materials, are part of the written record and must be forwarded to the commission. Speakers are required to have registered their full name on Zoom and will state their name and address before beginning their remarks. If you agree with the previous speaker, then state your agreement to avoid repetitious remarks. Speakers shall address all comments to the Planning Commission. Please silence your microphone until ready to speak. Thank you. We have to make some little accommodations here because of our distance meeting, and I appreciate the public's support and patience while we work through some of those issues. So, let me make sure I have a packet here to follow. Okay. Okay. Do we have any ex parte communications or conflict of interest to disclose? I can think of a big one that we probably ought to bring up here.
There's no conflict. So this is Eric, the planning chair. I am the applicant on agenda item number 6, so I won't be obviously voting or participating in that item except for as the applicant.
Okay. So we'll be giving you time to speak, Eric, during the applicant's portion. Other than that, we'll ask you to refrain from comments during our discussion period, where normally you'd be an active participant in that. So, okay. Is everybody comfortable with that? And do we have any other conflicts of interest to disclose or ex parte communications? Okay, it's noted that we have the one ex parte or the one conflict of interest, and Eric is recusing himself justly. We come to the point of the meeting where we entertain comments from the public that don't pertain to an item on the agenda. If your comment is directed at one of the agenda items, we ask you to save it for that more pointed time. But if you have any general comments, turn that over to the public for any input this time. While I make a brief pause to allow you time to. So remember, you just would use that raise your hand feature on Zoom if you'd like to comment. Lynn, do we have anyone out there interested?
I don't see any hands raised. Oh, here we go. Yes, one.
Okay.
It says Frank. Frank, will you give your full name and address?
My name is Frank Hare. I live at 1785 North, 225 West, North Ogden, 84414. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know if you can hear me. Part of my screen down here doesn't tell me I'm on. So
We can hear you, Frank. I can hear you. Everybody else?
okay. The only comment I would like to make is I was on the EDC committee for North Ogden for a number of years. And we looked at Washington Boulevard, 2700 South and 2550 as commercial property for the city for the tax base. And my only concern is that we make sure that that property, and we, to the best of our ability, is slated for commercial property along Washington Boulevard, 2700 North and 2550, because again, that's our major tax base. And if we put housing in there, we're just not going to have the tax base to run the city in the future. Okay, so that's something as you, as the planning committee, the commission, as you go forth and you look at these things, to keep that in mind, so that we do have a full tax base for this city to be able to run the city and make the improvements that the city needs to make itself a viable place for businesses to come into. And that's all I got. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Frank. Can you hold on for a second? I'm going to ask you a follow-up question, if I may.
Okay.
I didn't catch your last name, right? Call you Mr.
Hare, H-A-R-E.
Okay, Mr. Hare. So, being from your perspective as I assume someone who's obviously interested in economic development, would you support mixed use?
I would. I would support mixed use as long as the frontage along Washington Boulevard, 2700 and 2550 is commercial. What we put behind that, if we put apartments or condos or whatever, but as long as we have that frontage for commercial, so to invite the people into our city, I think, and I was kind of shocked that they're next to the cannery, they put on those condos right there, because that just took away that space as a not a viable tax base, but it took that space, and we're not going to be able to get the taxes out of that space that we would probably want for the city, so that we can continue to grow the city and to improve it and make sure that we have the money to make the improvements to either the sewers, the lights, and that type of thing. So did I
Mr.
answer
Hare,
your question? Go ahead.
You did. I'm going to ask you one more. Just so you know, from my perspective as one citizen here and one member of the Planning Commission, I share your disappointment with that same space. Those decisions were made based on the ordinances at the time, and you know, I was a part of that, and share your disappointment with that. So I see where you're coming from. When I referenced mixed use, I envisioned in my head space where maybe the commercial's on the bottom level with living area above it. I'd like your just maybe 20-second take on that.
So you mean similar? So we have a commercial on the bottom. We have apartments sitting on top of that.
Yeah.
As an example.
Yeah.
As long as, excuse me, as long as they're what's the word? I don't know. As long as they're compatible with what the city is trying to make itself look like. I guess is the only way I can explain it. If we put, and I'll just use this, if we put, we have the cannery, okay? And I'll just use that as an example. And we wanted to put apartments in and put apartments on top of the cannery. We don't want ultra modern apartments up there. We want something that's going to be a brick facade to match the bottom. And so if you look around the city of North Ogden here, we have a really mixed use of that. We have some very modern places. They're on the corner of Washington and 2600, where Smith's and all that is going in, and that's relatively modern. But we have on the southern part of North Ogden something a little older, okay, a little more historical. So as you move into those areas, you would build buildings that match that and somehow blend those in. But if we put living quarters on top, apartments, that would be okay as long as they're compatible with what's going on in that area at that time.
Thank you. I believe if I understood you correctly, you think that's an appropriate use of space as long as it's aesthetically congruent.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, you said it a whole lot shorter than I did. Thank you.
I just want to get done so I can have dinner. That's my only motivation. No, duly noted. Thank you for your comments, Mr. Hare. Do we have any others?
No, that's it.
Okay, appreciate the input from the public. That's always helpful. You know, when we're making decisions, to have just general thoughts like that we keep in mind for maybe not an agenda item tonight, but for future discussions in the future. So as stated, though, that's duly noted. And when in light of no further comments, let's move on to our legislative item. That would be number 6 on the agenda. And that is a public hearing, consideration, and recommendation on a legislative application to rezone property for land located approximately 3575 North 950 East. It's currently residential 110, R110, and HP3. And the application looks like it's to zone it HP2. And Rob Scott is going to be our presenter there.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Planning Commission. As the chair has indicated, that this rezone request is a map amendment. This would be a legislative decision that you would be considering and making a recommendation to the City Council. So as part of the circumstance that we find ourselves on the East Bench, there are a number of places where there are multiple zones that are in play with respect to development and potential development on that East Bench. In this case, we have some property that's owned by the applicant that has a combination of R110 and HP3, and it borders HP2. So the request is to take those R110 and HP3 zones and consolidate them into an HP2 zone. The HP2 zones have some specific requirements. I'll just quote from the ordinance: the developer shall provide site-specific studies, and they range everything from geology, faults, hydrology, slopes, soils, recharge, vegetation, wildlife, fire, and utility and parks constraints. Normally, if we were in a situation where those studies had not been done, they would have to have specific site studies done by and provided by the applicant. In this case, this property has been studied previously, and the city engineer has reviewed those existing studies and found that there are no additional studies recommendations that would preclude this rezone from R110, HP3 to HP2. So the HP2 requirements are the same as the HP3 requirements and will be applied at the time of subdivision review. The general plan for this area is identified on the general plan map, calls for the property to be developed as residential hillside. And that's defined as areas with significant slopes and associated issues with proximity to the mountains where particular land use controls are necessary to assure appropriate development. And the property is within the hillside neighborhood. So we also have, when we're looking at map amendments to our this particular application, we look at the general plan. There's some general guidelines to assist the Planning Commission and Council in making a determination. So I'll review those few guidelines that are applicable. The first one is that a definite edge should be established between types of uses, and that's pretty much it. The parcels are in a variety of zones. This rezone would consolidate these parcels into one zone designation. Zoning should reflect the existing use of the property to the greatest extent possible unless the area is in transition. And this parcel is the next phase of transitioning from vacant to residential. Where possible, properties which face each other across a local street should be the same zone. In this case, with the consolidation, they would all be the same zone. So it's consistent with that. Zoning boundaries should not cut across individual lots or developments. Again, by this consolidation, that would allow for the property to have one zone as part of their future development plans. We have some specific guidelines dealing with residential. The first one is avoid isolating neighborhoods. The proposed zone change will not isolate the existing neighborhood. Secondly, require excellence in design. These is a standard subdivision proposal, and the building permit process and review would be taking into account for those future homes. Additionally, consider development agreements for these types of developments. No development agreement is proposed or deemed necessary. So we've got a couple summary considerations for you tonight. Is the proposal consistent with the general plan, and how does the proposal relate to the zoning and land use policy guidelines? So our recommendation is to conduct the public hearing, consider the general plan rezoning guidelines, and make a recommendation to the City Council. Staff recommends approval of the rezone from HP3 and R110 to HP2. And staff believes the Planning Commission can find that the application is consistent with the general plan. And with that, I will be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, this is Commissioner Barker. I have a question. when I was reading through this, it talked about if you did a development agreement, there'd be a higher quality of developing in that area. I don't understand that, how development agreement can give a higher quality.
Well, and there is no proposed development agreement on this. As I indicated, this is a standard proposed subdivision. It does not include any type of mixed use or any type of multifamily. It's a standard subdivision. In those cases, we don't require a development agreement.
That's what I was wondering. I go, wow, that's kind of, it's an odd statement. The next question is, the HP2 and the HP3 requirements are the same. Why can't we just rezone it as an HP3, which is already part of it?
Well, excuse me, when I said that they're the same as it relates to the studies that are required for
Okay.
that zoning. The HP3 zone is a 2-acre minimum
Right.
lot, and HP2 is a minimum 12,500 square foot lot.
Right.
So now you see why
Okay.
they're interested in it.
Yeah, now that makes a lot more sense to me. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll insert that when this goes to the council and clarify that. Thank you for that comment.
Uh-huh.
We have other questions for Mr. Scott?
So I thought it was well done. I like it.
Okay, do we want to have any brief, high-level discussion before opening this up to the public for the, we are going to have a public hearing on this shortly. Or do we want any discussion before that? I'm comfortable enough to open up to the public, but I'd love to hear from you guys.
Do we need to hear from the applicant?
Well, I mean, given who he is, I don't know if we want to, but sure, let's give the applicant his time.
You should be having him make his comments during the public hearing.
During the public hearing?
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, we will do that. Okay. Are there
You
any
know, it
comments?
looks like the, I'm sorry, this is Commissioner Nancaro. It looks like this is just a portion of property that perhaps was left off when it was approved the first time, or, you know, somehow not accounted for. Unless I'm reading this wrong, I mean, this little piece of the HP3 to HP2, am I looking at this wrong? Or?
I think when they, you know, when the general plan was adopted and stuff, they draw broad strokes here. And then as the individual subdivisions are developed, it gets granular and you end up with a couple little fragment pieces like this. But I do agree that I think this is mostly a cleanup, but it also, yeah, I mean, the development all has to fit into the same zone pretty much for our requirements, and this will do that. I see this as mostly a cleanup.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know, is that how the rest of the commission's feeling? Yeah, I don't see this as a fundamental change to.
I just see it as a cleanup.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to open our public hearing where we can hear from the applicant and any other interested public.
You
I'll
can
make a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll second.
Okay, public hearing's open. We'll start by offering our applicant his day in the sun.
Thank you, co-chair. Eric Thomas,
Aye.
3588 North, 875 East. Just to kind of explain a little bit about this, the map, if you look at the map, one to make sure is that kind of squiggly line that goes through the property. That was all our property over time was zoned as R110. That was before the HP zones were even created. And that is the pressure line. So that is the water pressure line that feeds off Rice Creek. So until that water tank above the cove was built, that was as high up the hill as development could go. And so the ground above us, once the tank went in, was zoned as HP2. You can see the little sliver where the HP2 is split by HP3 for some reason, and that was on that phase 15 subdivision that we did approval on. So that just is clean up there. But I just want to make sure that it's clear, because it doesn't show on the map, that a portion of this R110 if you zoom in, is being converted to HP2 as well, just so that subdivision that we'll be applying for is all included under one zone. This is essentially the rest of the property that we own that's undeveloped that will be converting into the HP2 zone. So behind the cul-de-sac down a little bit, which is right by the city's well, just a little bit of R110, and then right underneath the 2 letters of HP, that big parcel, that big chunk of ground right there will be also from R110 to HP2. So for some reason, it was always intended to go straight down below the cove was HP2. And I think just when the zones were created and the maps were done, somebody colored a little bit outside the lines and it never got caught, and the map was adopted. So it has this jog of HP3 that goes over into HP2. There isn't anything different with the topography there as it is in the rest of the HP2 property. So, thank you.
Okay, our public hearing remains open for anyone else.
I don't see any hands.
Okay, last chance for input on this item. Just pause for a second. Okay, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second it.
There we got it.
Okay, Lynn, did you catch who made that and seconded it?
I did. Thank you.
Great, public hearing's closed. Okay, any discussion amongst the planning commission on this item?
You need to take a vote.
To close the public hearing?
Yeah.
I guess we do. All in favor of closing the public hearing via voice vote? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed to closing the public hearing? Okay, the public hearing is closed, and now we move into our comment section.
Chair, I have a couple things to share.
Chair.
As the acting chair, don't be too modest.
He called me co-chair earlier. It made me really uncomfortable.
I just want to mention 2 things. First of all, you know that in our last planning commission meeting, our city manager shared that the city council was reluctant to entertain zone changes. And I want you to know that I have reviewed the map that the General Plan Steering Committee has proposed, and that particular map is consistent with this request. So it's showing, in essence, low density up there. So I think that you might want to make mention of the fact that it's consistent with the map, the draft map that the General Plan Steering Committee has made. The other thing that I'm thinking is that there's a piece of property that the city owns. I think it's a well site, and also Weaver Basin also owns some property up there. Those properties, I'm thinking, should also be included in this map amendment. So that way we're not going to have little very small parcels that are not consistent with the zoning line here.
Shouldn't those city and utilities be the new civic zone?
They're so small that I don't think I would recommend that in this case, but that's definitely a possibility.
Are you proposing that we include this area to the north, up to the other boundary?
No, I'm suggesting that the 2 properties that are publicly owned, that they be considered to be put in that as well. We'll take a look at that as to whether or not they should be included as a civic zone. Thanks for that, Commissioner Waite. That's a good catch.
Well, in light of that, I wonder if we should really discuss that and just tonight. I mean, that's.
I'll do some further research on that one, and then we definitely don't want to hold this up for this
Right.
application.
I guess I'm suggesting we analyze the application as put forth, and then in a future meeting, take a look at the public owned property that's next to it. I don't see why this application would need to be held up while we discuss some public area that abuts it.
I agree.
So where I think that's wise to take that into consideration. I don't think it fundamentally changes. This is my opinion, commissioners, but I don't think it fundamentally changes the land usage here. I don't think this application fundamentally changes the land usage. I think it actually makes it more consistent with what is intended for the hillside. It's not like we're asking to put a business there or some kind of agricultural use or anything. It's residential, and I don't see any reason to not recommend to City Council that we do this. And then possibly the City Council can look at including those two zones as well, or those two parcels as well. I guess I don't know what to do with that.
I think we need to stick with what we have on our plate tonight, and we can deal with that at a later date.
I would agree with that.
Okay, is there anyone who has any contrary opinions or different opinions that because when I look at this, I believe this should be a recommendation from us. Do we have any counterpoints? Concerns? Any other
This is
discussion?
Commissioner Nancaro. I'd like to make a motion that we forward a positive recommendation to the City Council to approve this rezone from HP3 and R110 to HP2, and that we find the application is consistent with the current general plan as well as consistent with the general plan steering committee's draft map.
I will second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Call for a vote for a recommendation of the City Council that we approve that they make this zone change. Commissioner Waite, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Arner,
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Nancaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Did we get everyone? I believe we did. Okay, that recommendation will be forwarded on to the City Council. Okay, our next agenda item, and we would welcome Commissioner Thomas back if he would like to make further. I'll continue to lead the meeting. If from this point on in the meeting, since his business is passed, we welcome Commissioner Thomas to participate as he sees fit. As we move on to item number 7, discussion or direction of fire safety provisions regarding sensitive lands amendment city code, again by Rob Scott.
Commissioners, Ryan Barker, our fire marshal and city council member who is assigned to work with the planning commission, is joining us as well. As I have been working with Lauren and when putting together the various components of our sensitive lands overlay ordinance, one of the most critical ones is the fire provisions. So I've met with Lauren and I've met with council member / fire marshal Barker and discussed various provisions that deal with fire in the sensitive lands ordinance. So that's the purpose of this discussion tonight, is to share those with you, make sure that you're comfortable with those as we get closer to actually being ready to have that as a public hearing. So in the staff report, I've given you, I don't remember how many different provisions there are, but there's a fair number of them that deal with fire and fire-related issues. Some of those deal with study requirements. Others are related to specific standards. So in the staff report, I gave you specific references to the draft amendments. And so what I'd like to do is briefly go through each one of those. And then if you have questions, then we can consider those. So the first one is on, is part of the purpose and intent a paragraph for the ordinance. It basically identifies that fire protection measures are required to be addressed for sensitive area projects. So there's a list of various things, and fire is one of those that are specifically needed to be addressed as part of this particular ordinance. The next one is on pages 7 through 9, and on sub B, sub 5 under density, line, lot size, width, and characteristics. There's two provisions here. One has to do with buildable area of lots, and these are standard lots. The subsection 6 is the one that deals with flag lots, so we'll talk about that in a minute. So a couple things that we've added in here to clarify that there is a standard that says under sub B, under buildable area, single family dwelling structures on standard lots shall be set back no further than 250 feet. And then we've inserted the phrase except as provided in section 6, which is the flag lot provision. So that just clarifies and that if you're in a flag lot, you have specific standards that you're going to be asked to address as part of that standard. And then under section 4 under B, it also indicates that the fire marshal shall require and approve any needed fire hydrant and or required sprinkling system for the building. So just making sure that we're consistent with respect to those reviews and provisions. So do you want to address some, any questions about those? I think those are pretty straightforward. But the flag lot one is section 6, and there's a couple of things that we've added into this particular provision. Under H, remember the Planning Commission wanted, I should mention that in reviewing this with our fire marshal, that he felt comfortable with we were talking about what the length of the private lane should be for flag lots. He is comfortable with a 400-foot length. So that's to the lane, and then of course driveways can extend beyond that, but it's 400 feet as far as the length of the private lane. And then the next one is sub H. The lane shall not exceed a 10% grade. Then we've added unless approved by the fire marshal and city engineer. So
Hey Rob, I have a question. What's the difference between a lane and a driveway?
A lane is actually kind of a minor street. It's considered a street to provide access.
One private and one.
They're both private, but one has specific standards as far as you remember, can you see here under G where it talks about the pavement widths? And
okay, that's the standard. That was my question. That's the standard for a lane.
Correct.
And driveway is just a driveway. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, you got it.
But I was concerned that there wasn't a definition of what a lane. Okay, we got it.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Real quick, would it be okay if we just zoomed in on the document so you can see it a little better? Thanks.
So the idea here is that the 10% grade is one that we feel comfortable with. We want to make sure that the fire apparatus and what have you have the ability to get up these lanes and driveways. But at the same time, there may be a unique circumstance where there's a very short segment that may exceed that 10%. And so we've added in there and that an approval could be gained by the fire marshal and city engineer in those situations. So the next one was a concern about, we didn't have a provision as to where the lot width for flag lots was measured. So under I, we've added the phrase, the flag lot width will be measured at the front setback line. So that'll give some flexibility to the design of the lots. but at the same time, make sure that the width is an appropriate width as we've identified. So next, see, make sure I've got those. I think that's it as far as flag lots. And I did give you a new diagram. Again, we'll have a much nicer diagram that we're going to include in the ordinance. So I've got the appropriate standards as far as the setbacks, 50 feet front setback and 30 for the sides and the rear. Okay. Next is development standards is on page 12.
Hey, Mr. Scott, it's
Yes.
Commissioner Nancarrow, sorry. You had an item on K, I think you added. I'm not sure if it's worth noting any additional comment, but it talked about fire hydrants and or sprinkling systems may be required by the fire marshal.
Yes.
Okay.
So again, maybe it's being redundant, but it's also important for these, obviously, with their extended lengths away from standard fire hydrants and that the fire marshal can require those things. Thank you for catching that. Then if we go down to page 12, there is the section dealing with fire protection. And we've added in there that it's important there's a code, and Fire Marshal Barker can explain a little bit more in detail, but number 4, the wildland urban interface code shall be followed. So this particular code has to do with standards as far as the amount of vegetation that can be and is recommended around lots and so forth. Okay. So when we get him on here, he can share a little bit more about that. Then under, let's see, page 13, we have the section that talks about geology. And there's a provision in here that talks about critical facilities. And fire stations obviously are defined as a critical facilities, and they have a requirement to be a minimum setback of 150 feet from any active earthquake fault or fault trace. That's been in the ordinance all along, but just making sure that you're aware of all the ones that relate to fire. Then on page 14, we have a provision on streets and ways. This is already in our ordinance now, but the fire marshal shall be consulted for any cul-de-sac exception request. Remember, we have that in a different provision of the ordinance, and cul-de-sacs are limited to 600 feet.
I think your pages are different than ours, Rob. I tried to pull up the update, but yeah, the one that you just mentioned is page 20 in my.
Well, looking at the one, I don't think that's the correct ordinance if it's got that diagram in it.
This is the updated one that you sent. I think it was yesterday, Rob.
Well, I'm sorry if that's the case. I'm sorry, I don't know what I can do for you with respect to the page numbers, but it's the one, it is development standards 1127-5, and it's subsection F. So that's, keep going, go all the way down to keep going. Section F.
Oh,
that's the one we just did with the geology. Sure. I think what's going on is the track changes showed back up, Lynn.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's happened.
So the next one is, that's F. And then the next one is 27-6, review and approval procedure. Go on down to that. And it's sub B. So where it talks about, I don't think we made any changes in this one. The Planning Commission will basically, as part of the conceptual and preliminary approval, identify specific information that they're interested in seeing that includes fire protection. And then 1127.8 is the appendix, and it has the details of the specifics for these various studies. And so D is the one that deals with vegetation.
Oh,
Obviously a critical component of fire protection. And G actually has the specifics of fire protection. So there you have it. Does the Planning Commission have any concerns about any of those language provisions?
Well, I had a question. I don't know if I should save it for Ryan or ask you about the, what did you call it? The buffer space, the vegetative space that's designed as a buffer?
Right.
Like, why do we not, if that's,
Well, I would suggest that you ask Ryan to address that code specifically. Yeah.
yeah, let's do that. Okay.
I do have a question, and I don't know, again, like Brandon, I don't know whether this is a Ryan question or a Rob question, but over the years with all the California wildfires, there's been a lot of discussion going around because vegetation is mandated in California almost up to the structures, yet, and people have been cited and had issues there when they've cut vegetation back away from their houses to protect the structures. And I don't know whether that's the same wildfire code that we're talking about here, or whether this is something altogether and it's just another California idiosyncrasy.
I really don't know how to answer that. I think Ryan would be best one to answer that though.
Okay.
If we have many mentions of California fire code in our code, then I suggest we scrap it and start over.
That was kind of my concern too, because all they know how to do is burn.
That is exactly correct. And I've told you my horrible story from the Oakland fire, the Planning Commission member from Medford. So believe me, that's not something that we have entertained. It's something that we feel is appropriate to be considered and studied, but safety is number one.
Okay, thank you.
So I don't know if you can let Ryan be a part of the discussion, Lynn.
he is here.
Yeah, let's invite Ryan to address us.
Okay, I'm here. Do you need my name and address as well?
Now you have to.
Okay.
Of course.
Don't ask. I'm always going to say yes.
We can find you.
Yeah. So the Wildland Urban Interface Code that was addressed, it doesn't, I'm not an expert on it yet because we haven't really used it in our city, but speaking with the fire marshal from Weber Fire that utilizes it all the time, it's when you're building houses up in the urban interface area, which is where the sensitive land is. And it mainly addresses fire protection requirements. So if you have a lane over so many feet, then you'll put a fire hydrant at the end of the lane. So if there's ever a fire, we're not shutting down the whole lane to drag hose up it. It does address a little bit on vegetation up to the houses, but that's more of it addresses it when the home's built, but after the home's built, we can't go back in and enforce the code. It's the same with all residential structures. If I put a sprinkler system in any home or we require them, once the home's built, I can't go into there to enforce that it gets maintained. It's the same thing with the urban interface. So if you remember, we had a pole patch fire about 3 or 4 years ago, right at the base of pole patch. there was a barn that were doing a wedding, and so they cleared out all around it and had gravel down. When the fire came, it went right around the barn, and it burned up 2 houses right next to it that didn't clear out around their house. So that's why we give recommendations on how to keep them clear. But after the home's built, it's kind of hard to enforce them. The only, yeah, go ahead.
What is that recommendation for that vegetative buffer?
So you should have about 30 feet. Yeah, it's about 30 feet. You clear away the oak brush and make it just small grass or small plants. And it's not to prevent the fire from burning your home, but it's so if the fire is burning on the hillside, the firefighters can get in there and they actually just kind of push the fire around your house and it just keeps on burning and goes right on by.
So that vegetative buffer exists on the lot boundaries?
On what?
Not around the home?
No,
it
it's
looked
around
like
the home.
buffers.
Nope.
It looked like the map we had.
Yeah, around the home, not on the lot.
Okay, wasn't there one back up to page 12, I believe it was, that had a map that showed the a vegetative buffer zone on the lot boundary? I thought. We could go back up there.
That's the setbacks, that's the building setback.
That was the driveway.
15, maybe.
That was the driveway landscape buffer for the lane. Was that one?
No, that's not the right one, Len. That one's gone.
Which one are you looking for?
That one. So you can see that the private lane is in the hash mark, and then there's an asterisk. That's where a potential fire hydrant and potential turnaround area could be required.
Right, but what's on the page above it? What was I looking at there?
That's deleted.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That wonderful.
This shouldn't be on our packet.
Correct. We'll get it figured out. We'll get rid of our infamous track changes. That's gone.
Okay. Okay, that one had me very confused.
Sorry.
Okay, and I was wondering why we weren't doing that on smaller lots and stuff, if that were the case. But that's fine. Ryan, do you have anything else for us?
Any other questions? Or I mean, I can talk all night, but I prefer not to. Any specific questions or concerns?
I don't have any concerns with it, or I'd probably ask how passionate you were about it, but I don't really have any concerns with what was presented. Does anyone else on the planning commission?
No, Ryan, do you feel like what we have in the code is sufficient for the fire?
Yeah, I do. The other thing that it's not really going to go in this code, but the fire district, we pair up or join forces with North Ogden and Pleasant View. We have to, for the wildfires, we have to contribute so much time and effort each year on how to prevent wildfires. So we're working on getting up into these areas when the homes are built and actually do a chipping and other stuff to kind of prevent these homes from burning if there ever is a wildfire. That's just barely got started in the last 2 years. So when this does get approved and these homes start being built, we'll be up there making sure the lanes are clear, making sure there's clear passage to each of the homes. With these standards, we can make that work.
Okay. I mean, this is something we definitely need to take serious. I'm not in any position of expertise to have much comment on it, but I know that when that fire happened in Uinta, this is probably back 3 to 4 years ago. It was on a really windy day in the summer. I know there was some honest concern about people not being able to get out of their cul-de-sacs and things like that up on that hill. And so, I mean, these are definitely standards we need to look at. I don't have enough expertise to make a lot of recommendations, and I'm inclined to just go with what our fire marshal says there, but I do enunciate the importance of it. Because I know some people that was a really scary situation up there in Uinta. If you guys don't know that fire, Google it. That was you could see it from the freeway, as you went up I-84 up the canyon, and there was a real concern And some beautiful homes were lost also.
And so, not to speak badly about one of the homeowners, but we did wildland fire training at UN a month or two before the fire started with all of Weber County. And they went to one of the homes that said you need to clear up around your home, or else if there is a fire, it will burn. And he didn't want to do it because he liked the vegetation growing right up next to his home. And then it burned.
Yeah, and there would be nothing we could do about that. But from an urban design, right? But from urban design, like I think there was some ways those cul-de-sacs and stuff laid out that when the fire came in, it made escape very difficult, right? And,
yep.
and just, I mean, can you imagine being think yourself in a hillside cul-de-sac and fires all around you, and where do you go, right? You can't
Yep.
go up, can't go down. Like it was a bad situation. So.
And yeah, we had the same concern when we were up in Pole Patch on their fire. There was only one way in and one way out, and when the fire's coming, you kind of trapped. So that's where it comes back to the Planning Commission to make sure that we're giving multiple routes out of these neighborhoods.
Excellent points. Rob, does that give you what, I mean, you were asking for discussion and direction there. Does that, does our lack of direction give you some direction?
Well, I think of all of the codes that we're working with, these are very serious matters, and especially when it comes to this kind of safety material. So I didn't expect that there would be a lot of concern about these standards. I just wanted to make sure that you're in the loop. I'm working diligently. I'm hoping, I'm crossing my fingers, we'll have the final ordinance ready to go for a public hearing here at our second meeting in February. So this is one of the most important ones, as you well know. So thanks for your help and input.
I just have a comment going back to what Dawn said about a lane in a driveway. Somehow in that ordinance that can be defined or described, because when I read through, I had that same problem. What is, you have this road going up, also you go to a lane. I pictured a lane going right to the house, and now we have a driveway. And so it's a little confusing to me. I don't know if we need to do that, or when people apply for a permit, that be taken care of.
It'll be taken care of as part of the subdivision
review,
but I will take another look at that language to see if we need to make a little more clarity there. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Nancaro, you had a comment in the meeting. Did you feel like that was answered? You asked Rob a question about halfway through his presentation.
I'm sorry you were garbled, but I think you said Commissioner Nancaro. I'm fine with this as written.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that your question was answered that you posed.
Yeah, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, given that Rob seems satisfied with keeping us in the loop, that would end our 2 legislative items on the agenda, I believe. Taking us to the part where we can just talk if there's any other remarks, general remarks from the Planning Commission. I, for myself, appreciated the public input today about wanting to see business and only business on Washington Boulevard. I don't know, obviously when the rubber hits the road, that's always a more complicated issue. But I thought the sentiment was good and well expressed. I do remind the public that, we only adopt future legislation, and something that was existing and an application that was put in is just something we can't control at that point. But I thought that was good input, and I appreciate that coming from the public, that engagement. I thought that was great. Anyone else have any remarks from our planning director?
Yes, I have just a report from what took place at the planning or the city council meeting this last week. So similar to what we did with the planning commission, we shared with the council our land use survey. Also the Coldwater Meadows phase 3, you'll remember that rezone of those 3 lots. That was approved by the council. And also Cooperstown, they approved that particular project. We're You got some things that you're going to be seeing in the hopefully in the near future, subdivision, et cetera, and their finalized landscape plan.
Does that go in as a 4-story? I know there was some discussion on that.
I think it's 3 stories as the max, but you've got some drive underground parking and then 3 stories on top of that. So total of 46 feet in height. And then we also had a discussion about the MPC zone and its future. And the city council, I think, feels comfortable with maintaining that zone in our ordinance. There's only one other property that's in the city now and one other property that potentially would have the ability to even request an MPC zone. The council did want to have a look at height requirements in a portion of the ordinance, maybe bring that down some. And they also wanted to eliminate the possibility of parcels less than 5 acres. So that was the extent of what they requested us to take a look at. We're going to include those 2 changes in our land use code change as opposed to processing a specific amendment for those 2 things. But other than that, I think that's where we're at with the things that happened to the council. So.
Okay, John, do you have anything, or is John on and does he have anything for us?
He is here.
I'm here. I do not have anything other than just that, so you are aware that if you are interested, the General Plan Committee is moving forward on their items, as well as, for example, talking about moderate income housing again. So that's one of those topics that I think that committee and this group will be having some discussions about some ways or ideas that the city can help relieve the burden of moderate income housing in our area. And obviously, as you remember, moderate income housing is not necessarily subsidized housing. It's just focused on, I'd probably call it starter homes or apartments that are nice and habitable, but allow for people of all wages to live in North Ogden, if that makes sense. So.
Acting Chairman Mason, may I make a comment? This is Mayor Berube.
Please, Mayor.
Once again, thank you guys for your service. It means a lot to us, and we appreciate your dedication to the positions you've accepted. I just want to give you an update. We have reviewed applications for those who would like to serve on the Planning Commission with the 2 openings that are taking place. I reviewed those with Chairman Thomas and City Council Member Barker. We will be conducting a couple interviews tomorrow and hope to have those names to the council for approval so that they can be approved, and then with your February 2nd meeting, they would be available to participate. So I just wanted to give you that brief update.
We've also invited Don to come back to, this is not his last meeting. We're going to have him come back on, it's February 3rd, and give him a proper goodbye.
I heard that Chairman Thomas was having a catered dinner as a farewell party for Don. Is that correct?
Yep, we are. It's going to be done through Zoom. So
you're just going to show the food then on the
screen? I'm going to eat in front of all of you.
Perfect. Thanks for letting me make those comments, Acting Chairman Mason.
No problem. May I make a few of my own? So I've really enjoyed working with both Commissioner Waite and Commissioner Nancaro, and I believe her term is up as well. And I just give my full endorsement for her to continue on the Planning Commission. I find her to be prudent and wise and fair and experienced now, and I think it's hard to turn away that experience. And I'd love to see her back. So love to see Don back as well, but I don't think that's going to happen. So
yeah, probably not.
So because I would say the same about Don. I just really enjoyed working with you guys. I believe the entire commission feels the same. I'll let you guys save your thoughts for next week, unless you choose to make them here. But, yeah, I just want to give my endorsement there, Mayor. And obviously, it's up to you and the city council. But I think the experience that Commissioner Nancaro brings is valuable, as well as her perspectives. I've always enjoyed it. So,
I would agree with your comments, and thanks for making those.
thank you. Okay, any other comments? Okay, I think we are ready to entertain a motion to adjourn and to get our evening back, guys.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor by voice vote? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.
See ya.